Mr. Kelley was most recently a senior fellow at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota. Before joining the Humphrey School in 2007, he served in the Minnesota Senate for 10 years and the Minnesota House of Representatives for 4 years. During his legislative service, Steve chaired the Senate Education Committee and served on the committees dealing with energy and telecommunications regulation in both the House and the Senate. Mr. Kelley was chosen by Governor Tim Walz in January to head up the multifaceted Department of Commerce because of his extensive experience in many of the industries that the DOC oversees. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Kelley.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate the invitation to be here and talk with all of you today. As Kelly mentioned, and as the calendar would indicate, I am at the end of my 4th month in the job. So it would be a bit presumptuous of me to predict the future of the insurance industry in Minnesota and the role of the department with respect to all of you. But I will try to say a few things by way of introduction to me so that you know a little bit about the way I approach things, and then a little bit about the department. One of the things that comes with a change of administrations is a change of personnel. Not a complete change, but at least in our case, the governor's appointment of me to be the commissioner in our department, but that has also led to some other changes in the department. So, for example, recently, Grace Arnold became our deputy commissioner in the insurance division. Before her appointment, Grace worked for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and then at Bright Health, an innovative health insurer. And she brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the team, and I'm looking forward to the way that she'll strengthen the work that we are doing in insurance overall. Peter Brickwetty has been, the assistant commissioner, has been leading our licensing division, which works with most of you, and so there's continuity there. And then the other area of interest that I've heard about in the insurance industry generally is our enforcement division, where we respond to complaints from consumers about violations of the law and look into the conduct of insurers in the marketplace. And our new assistant commissioner in that division is Matthew Vodder, and I'm excited about Matt's joining the department. He, not too long ago, retired from the Minnesota National Guard at the rank of colonel. He was a student of mine at the university in a security technologies course, so he also brings some cybersecurity knowledge to the department. But one of the things that that recommended him to me as a new team member was that as a student, he didn't hesitate to disagree with me when he did. He was not worried about his grade when he had a different point of view. So I think that will be a useful perspective in the department. As Kelly said, I've done a lot of things. I started my career as a lawyer doing commercial litigation in a variety of kinds, accounting malpractice, securities fraud, any kinds of transactions that ended up having a financial component to them. But in 1992, after being active in politics for some time, I was elected to the House of Representatives, and my advice that I received back then was that the House is a seniority-driven place, and if you wanted to have an influence on things, you needed to become an expert in something that nobody else knows anything about. So I picked telecommunications as the thing that I would work on, and my timing was good because 1993 was when they invented the graphical browser for the internet. And up to that point in time, the only way to get on the internet was to use Unix and type in the right codes. I tried to do that and I couldn't figure out how to quit. because I didn't know the right Unix command for that. So things became a lot more interesting in the telecommunications space after that. And that led me into the committee, as Kelley said, that works on energy as well. So I got involved in energy policy, energy efficiency, and other topics. So I left the legislature at the end of 2006 and have been teaching at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs in the science, technology, and environmental policy area for 12 years and had a great time working with students. But when the governor was elected, I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to go back into state service. I thought working for the University of Minnesota was a continuation of my public service, to which I've been committed for a long time, but now I'm pleased to have the opportunity to be back in state service. And somewhat unusually for commissioners of Commerce, since I was in the legislature when we merged the Department of Public Service that dealt with regulated utilities with the then Department of Commerce to create this broad-based institution that is really distinct from any other regulatory entity across the country. And I told the governor I was interested in the role that energy could play in his goal for One Minnesota. And so unlike previous Commerce commissioners, my motivating interest was on the energy and regulated utilities side and less on the financial side, except that I had, over the time of my career, doing a variety of roles, dabbled in some of the other areas that the Commerce Department regulates. So I know enough to be dangerous in a variety of areas, and am continuing to learn more about the ways the department works with you and the other professionals that we license. I think the opportunity that we have in front of us is, as a department, to be more responsive to our customers. One of the areas of interest I had while I was teaching at the Humphrey School was in how government could be more innovative. And as part of that, I focused on a process called design thinking that came out of the work that architects, product designers, and others do, where they try to understand as well as they can the needs of the users and develop a sense of empathy with the users so that the building or the product or the other thing that they're designing really meets a core need of the user. And that's a perspective that I intend to bring to the department in our work with all of you. And I think it's one of the things I learned as part of that process is that you have to be very clear about who your users are. And we have at least two groups of users. One is represented by all of you, and that is the group of people that we license, and you have needs with respect to that licensing process that we are responsible for meeting in terms of efficiency, in terms of responsiveness, but also in terms of making sure that everybody is following the rules that the legislature has set out with respect to the practice of selling insurance. But we also have a group of users that are your customers. And what we have to do also is, besides understanding your needs, is make sure that we are understanding the needs of your customers so that we are taking actions that benefit them at the same time that we are dealing with you. So what I can tell you about our work at the department over the next 3 years, the Senate willing, of course, in terms of confirmation, is that we'll be trying to better understand the needs that all of you have, but also understand the needs that users have, your customers, so that our work is meeting both sets of needs of those users. One area of common interest that we have relates to the recent spring weather. it was kind of late in the process when everybody said, hey, we should start talking about people buying flood insurance, especially because of the 30-day delay for the effective date of a new policy. And so looking forward, for example, our communications person was just in Chicago with the Minnesota Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management to talk about how do we do a better job educating people about the need for flood insurance and making sure that the people who need it actually have it. And from the state's point of view, we want people to be appropriately insured. And flood insurance for folks who are at risk is important to that. We also have an interest in issues, this intersection between the federal flood insurance program and private sector insurance. So for example, I recently learned that the federal program had changed their rules so that now if a consumer decides to buy a private policy and let their federal policy lapse, that they don't get any premium return on the lapsed federal policy. And that is a change in approach for the federal government, but it's one that all of us should be concerned about communicating to customers so that they don't make a purchase decision related to flood insurance that's untimely with respect to their ability to recover any value that they may have had in a federal policy. That's just one example of areas that we would like to work together with all of you to make sure that we are meeting together the needs of the customers that all of you have. So I'm sure you've heard the governor and lieutenant governor talk about One Minnesota. To me, I grew up in Minnetonka in the western suburbs, and to me that means especially strengthening the connections with greater Minnesota. And after the legislative session's over and we have time to get me out on the road more, one of the things I'd like to do is come to a variety of communities around Minnesota and visit with you, visit with some of the other institutions that we regulate, like credit unions, state chartered banks, and others, so that I have a better idea of what's going on in greater Minnesota, so that I can, as part of the governor's and lieutenant governor's administration, do a better job of communicating that back as we think about policy changes that the department can implement on its own, or that we can advocate to the legislature in future legislative sessions. So if you're willing to or interested in hosting me in your hometown, I hope you'll contact me at the Department of Commerce or the staff there and let us know, because I would love to have a chance to sit with you in your office, in your hometown, and talk about the challenges that you face and the challenges that your customers face. We're going to, the approach the governor has talked about with respect to regulatory humility doesn't mean that we're going to stop regulating, but we are going to do it in a common sense way that reflects a sense of justice and consistency that match the governor's and lieutenant governor's campaign promises. And that's the promise that I'll make to you as part of this, is that through better job listening to all of you, we will do a better job at the department of being consistent and responsible and helping you do a better job of helping your customers be protected against the bad things that might happen in life. Thanks very much for the work you do, and thanks very much for having me out today. Appreciate it.